All right. Hello and welcome to the webinar. I'm James Durham, the Deputy Director of the Maryland State Law Library in Annapolis, and I'll be the moderator for today's program. I'd like to begin with a few announcements and introductions. First, if you would please mute your telephones and your computer microphones during the webinar. I actually, at the moment, can hear someone typing. So please mute your telephones. We have over 100 people registered for the webinar today, so it's going to make the webinar have a lot better sound quality if we can mute those telephones. Second, please click on the chat bubble located at the top of your webinar screen in the lime green circle. Click and drag the chat box to the right side of your computer screen so that it doesn't block your view of the PowerPoint. And then please keep the box open so that any messages will be visible to you during the presentation. If you'd like to submit a question, please feel free to send the questions to me, James Durham, in a private message, and I'll be collecting those. Our program is co-sponsored by SRLN, the Self-Represented Litigation Network, and SCCL-SIS, the State Court and County Law Libraries Special Interest Section of the American Association of Law Libraries. Please note that our webinar is being recorded for later posting along with the PowerPoint on the websites of SRLN and SCCL. The webinar is part one of a two-part series on access to justice. The second webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, March 24th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern and will be entitled ATJ, Best Practices for Court, County, and Government Law Libraries. Panelists for that webinar will be Sarah Galligan, Joan Ballistri, and Janine Liebert, with me returning as the webinar moderator. Registration information will be distributed soon through SRLN and AALL's My Communities. Today's webinar is A2J, Who's Your Partner and Where Are You Going? And I'm joined by two panelists. Terry Conroy is the Assistant Director for Legal Research Instruction at the University of South Carolina School of Law. Sarah Galligan is the Director of the Ramsey County Law Library in Minnesota. We're also joined by Michael Bernard, the Database and Operations Manager for SRLN, who will be handling technology issues behind the scenes. Thanks, Michael. I'd also like to thank Catherine Alternator, the SRLN coordinator, for generating the idea of a joint SRLN-SCCL webinar, and also for supplying the software and the tech support to make this webinar series possible. Thank you so much, Catherine. The main portion of our webinar will last approximately 50 minutes, with 10 minutes remaining for questions and answers. Chat will be live during our webinar, and I'll be monitoring for your private messages to me. So with that, I'll pass the baton to Terry Conroy, who will begin our program. Terry?
Hi. Next slide, please. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to talk about partnering for access to justice. Let's start with why we partner. First, for many of us, there are geographic disparities in the availability of law libraries between urban and rural areas within our states, which we need to address. Second, as law librarians, we want to share our valuable resources and expertise to promote access to justice through access to legal information. Third, we partner to enhance the visibility of our law libraries, which creates even more networking and partnership opportunities. And last, for the academics among us, we partner to prepare our students for the practice of law, not just for the few, but for all. Sarah?
Thanks, Terry. This is Sarah Galligan. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining in to hear our webinar today. As to who we partner with, the Special Committee on Access to Justice this past year was comprised of law librarians from all types of libraries, and that was a unique experience for me to learn what was happening with the academics and the private firm librarians, and then me being from a court library, I had my perspective, but it was interesting to share. So right off the bat, I'll say that was a helpful partnership to learn what the other librarians were doing. Another obvious partnership for us is to reach out to the legal community and find those who we have similar agendas and goals and objectives with, and to partner with them. And in some fortunate states that have access to justice commissions or their equivalents, there's an organized effort there for possible partnership with legal entities within the state. How we partner was also something that came from the committee that was of interest, having to do with some overriding areas that were defined by the multi-type group. This was also reported in the white paper that was published, but we're going to hone in today on these particular areas to describe how partnerships can happen, and that would be around training, core collections, centralized websites, other ways to partner, and then promoting the use of enhanced technologies, including document assembly. And then we're also going to talk about innovations such as the Incubator Programs that are available. Next slide, please.
Okay, so we're going to talk about training. One way for law librarians to address geographic disparities is to provide basic legal research training for non-law librarians, both public and academic. Such training could include in-person instruction as well as online research, guides, tutorials, and training materials. Because public and academic non-law librarians may not have access to expensive prescription legal databases, we can focus on free and low-cost legal resources, particularly government resources and court-approved forms. We can include tutorials on how to avoid the unauthorized practice of law in states like South Carolina, where UPL laws are strict and non-law librarians are concerned about crossing the line from legal reference to legal advice. They appreciate training on the state's UPL laws. Non-law librarians also welcome advice on how to develop their own basic legal collections that they can tailor to their regions, like areas in the coast where folks are retiring. They may focus on elder law. Sarah will talk more about core collections later. One example of a training program by an academic law library is our Circuit Riders program here at the University of South Carolina. We're the only public law school library in South Carolina. We have no state law library and no system of public law libraries, but we do have a strong public library system. And we have university and technical college libraries. So in 2007, we decided to address the fact that folks were traveling to our law school library from across the state for help with legal research, unaware of the resources at their public or academic libraries, and unaware of the many free government resources available to them. So we announced our idea for legal research training workshops at our South Carolina Library Association conference. We had representatives from legal services, public library system, and our library school as panelists at our program. We surveyed attendees, and several public and academic libraries volunteered to host workshops. So we conducted several workshops that summer, and just as we were running out of money, we received an anonymous $10,000 grant, which was wonderful. We were able to travel to 13 of our 16 judicial circuits before we had to stop traveling because of our increased teaching load in our 1L program. So we are now in the process of converting our Circuit Riders training materials, the videos, the topical guides, and all of the materials to an online format. We've created it in a LibGuide format, which is easy to work with, and we can share with others. Our goal is for non-law librarians to use our materials to train their personnel, and the general public can access it as well. In fact, we just posted self-help bankruptcy materials on our guide at the request of Judge Waits from our bankruptcy court. We can also share our training materials and other resources with our fellow law librarians. We recently shared our training materials with the law librarians in Louisiana who are developing their materials. And back in 2010, the University of Florida Law Librarians wrote in a newsletter that they used our Circuit Riders materials to conduct a legal research workshop for their public librarians in their state. I personally was inspired by the Southern California Association of Law Librarians handbook for non-law librarians when developing our Circuit Rider materials. And we linked to the LA Law Library's video on how to provide legal reference without legal advice, without giving legal advice. And in fact, my original inspiration for our Circuit Riders program, workshop program, was a AALL presentation several years ago by Richard Leiter and the folks from Nebraska. I believe that we need a central repository to share our training materials, tutorials, videos, recommended core collections that Sarah will talk about. Something like the RIPS teaching or our AllSys sourcebook for legal research. Perhaps the repository could be hosted by AALL's Legal Information Services to the public special interest section. But for now, Sarah will talk about other training opportunities. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Terry. Other possibilities for training exist, especially in county and court libraries where self-help clinics are taking place, to train the volunteer attorneys. Sometimes we have attorneys coming over who are potential volunteers who practice in, say, family law, but they're being recruited to help out in a housing clinic. So to put together materials and to reach out to assist those Bar Association members who are our partners will be very helpful if we have materials and can get ready to train them. We also do direct patron training in the county law libraries in such places as San Diego and King County. They have classes in the library, but where we can't do that, it's been helpful to collaborate with the public libraries who already offer classes and offer direct to the patrons. We can promote those classes in public library locations and then use their PR and their distribution system to market and publicize those particular opportunities. Finally, it would be interesting if a law library was able to sponsor a program within their legal community to bring access to justice partners together. That's kind of a unique aspect. Probably the more likely situation would be where we kind of watch what's going on in the legal community around us, or network with people.
University College of Law. We'll be right with you.
So that we can
Founded in
so that
1900
we are able to
Stetson University College of Law is located in Tampa Bay,
we are
Florida,
able
with a main
to
campus near St. Petersburg and a law center in
try to
downtown
invite
Tampa.
ourselves to be on
Stetson
panels
is fully accredited by the
and
American
work
Bar
with
Association.
those
Thanks for
particular
holding.
presentations and present the law library side of
Stetson
the
University
story.
College of Law has a
I
nationally
just
acclaimed
want to expand a little bit and talk about partnerships that we've seen happen here in Minnesota, particularly with the public library. As I said, we reach out and use their class space and their outreach and marketing opportunities to do classes, but we also recruit and bring in volunteer lawyers who are experts in particular areas of the law, and then they do presentations on things such as criminal expungement, debt collection, child support. Those classes are very helpful. We've also had Pro Bono Net grant support to go around the state and deliver training with a legal aid partner on the Law Help MN website, which has been very helpful to train public librarians about what those resources are. And in a survey that was done on that particular topic, turned out that not too many public librarians here in Minnesota were aware of the Law Help website, so that was very helpful to be able to do that. As I said, with regard to specific subject presentations, we had great success taking a program on criminal expungement that started here in the courthouse, where a volunteer lawyer came to assist. That was very successful in terms of walking people through the criminal expungement process and him giving legal advice. And we went out to our local community library that is kind of in a more impoverished area of St. Paul and asked if that public library would be willing to host that same program. And it turned out that they were happy to accept that invitation to host the criminal expungement expert out on that particular public library location. And when we went back and reported to him that, yes, they're willing to have you come out and do that particular program, his reply was he had actually been there months before and spoken to the director of that library and had been declined the opportunity. So I think it was nice that the law librarians were able to go out and visit with the director there and express and promote that particular partnership, working with a volunteer lawyer and getting it approved. And not only has it been successful in that particular location, but 2 other branches of the St. Paul Public Library are now actually doing that same presentation, so effectively getting it out of downtown St. Paul and into the public libraries. So I guess to conclude, I would like to say that I think one of our more comfortable immediate partners are the public librarians. They are the gatekeepers for our users. Quite often, people turn up in public libraries. They don't even know the county law libraries exist. But we do have a tradition with them of open access. We're trusted information providers. We are evolving with them in these community support roles, and I think public librarians are great partners for us. Next slide, please.
I did hear, by the way, an ad for Stetson. So if Stetson is listening and has us on speaker, I'd appreciate it if you mute it. Thanks. So I want to talk about Centralized website. Yeah.
I think we're going to skip core collections then.
Are we?
Go back 1 slide. There we go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll go through this quickly because I know we're kind of losing time here. Core collections are one area for great collaboration. This is the bread and butter, literally, of what law librarians and librarians do. But the focus now is on pro se resources. First of all, they are going to vary by state. So for librarians to come together, it's important to understand that these are non-traditional publishers and publications for the most part. Some of these are going to be on free online websites where states are on board with access to justice, and they're making those materials available. Again, public librarians may not know about these things, but to define those websites and that information, as well as other print materials such as from Nolo Press, can be very helpful. And this can also be a tool that can be promoted in the academic library, both the law and the non-law library, where it's possible that pro se parties are turning up looking for information. Again, addressing geographic disparities. If there's not a county law library, there may be an academic institution that could help. For public and public law libraries, some examples of resources that have been created in the Minnesota Association of Law Libraries created a core resource that includes both basic and advanced items. We updated this in 2012 for some training that we were doing. But the basic resources address, again, geographic disparities where smaller rural public libraries may not be able to afford the larger gamut of collection material. So there's a distinction between basic materials versus advanced, which may be picked up by the library system in a region, which may be bigger and have more available to it. There's also some libraries here in Minnesota are doing the LibGuides. Terry had mentioned those, but these are LibGuides specifically for pro se parties, which are like a Pathfinder 2 material, but they also serve as a good collection builder. The legal information services to the public SIS public library toolkits are excellent and should be promoted where possible. Not every state has them, but many more do now. They follow, for the most part, a particular template that lists primary legal materials, but they're also a good backdrop to what public librarians might want to consider placing in their collections. Once these tools are created, it could be that the local chapter might want to post it on a website and just then have a place centrally located for public librarians to go to find these, or academic librarians to find these resources. And another important thing would be to partner with these end users, librarians, to let the creators know, the law librarians know who's using and how they're using, or whether or not other resources should be added to the core collections. So, again, LibGuides are very important for academic library building. The public library is a great partner because people may be going to them for computer access, non-courthouse hours, and then also looking for print materials. As I said, the public librarians can also give feedback on particular topics that are of interest. And On a Pro Bono Net webinar I was involved in a few years ago, we did a poll of the public librarians to find out what topics were coming through their particular libraries, and the most common answer was employment, unemployment, discrimination, termination, and then family law. And then there were another whole list of categories of particular topics that were of interest. So that partnership and that feedback is very important. Next slide, please.
This is Terry. I'm sorry, Sarah, that I skipped core collections there for a second because I think it's so important. It's really, really important for our state. We do only have public libraries and we do not have public law libraries. But I'm going to talk a little bit about centralized websites. Law librarians, legal aid organizations, courts, bar associations, and access to justice groups can work together to create and maintain centralized websites in their state for legal resources, forms, information on free and low-cost legal representation, legal clinics, and even legal research workshops. It could be hosted by the state law library, like the People's Law Library of Maryland, an academic law library in your state's legal aid organization, or your state's Access to Justice Commission. We can all share our resources and help maintain the website. If your state has a law help website, you can help contribute materials, personnel, and expertise to maintain it. So many law librarians are doing great things, creating research guides and tutorials and digitizing primary materials that they post on their own websites. We even link to each other. But would it not be great to have all of the information in your state in one centralized location on the web for researchers to consult? We could still maintain our own websites, but we would share what we have and help maintain the centralized website regardless of who hosts it. I would love to see academic law librarians and perhaps law school and library school students help maintain such a site and maybe even host it. Perhaps we could write for grants to defray the cost. All are examples of ways to partner that Sarah will talk more about now. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Terry. So other ways to partner might be with other associations, again, legal aid agencies. Law Help is one that is in approximately 25 states. And then Pro Bono Net has been a great partner for bringing together. Actually, Pro Bono Net is a nonprofit group that has worked with legal aid agencies to develop law help in many states. And they have been very effective. As I said, we worked with them here in Minnesota to develop a customized law help program. It's the Ramsey County Law Help, which was part of a grant project that now has been somewhat replicated in the state of Florida with LSC and TIG funding. There's also other public libraries that have worked with Pro Bono Net and other law libraries to expand resources in other particular parts of the country. And here again, not part of Pro Bono Net, but I mentioned that we use the VLN legal aid group here to enhance our criminal expungement services and presentations in the public library, which was very helpful. So I think those have been very helpful here in terms of promoting and reaching out to the legal aid agencies who now have respected our partnership and our contribution to what they've been able to pull together, and we've been building on that. For court libraries, government libraries, obviously a big partner, next slide please, is the courts. So most courts are on board with Access to Justice, so there's no blurring of mission in terms of what law libraries are about and what the courts are about. It's just defining the particular roles. Obviously, we have a special relationship to the court because of the proximity of our locations and our services, and that's something to promote about the law library when we try to reach out and explain why we want to develop a partnership with the court. Quite often, what that ends up being is a self-help center, either a structurally, it's there, it's got all the characteristics of a self-help center if it were standalone outside the law library, but it's inside the library, with the library partnering with the court, pro bono attorneys for providing the legal advice, local bar associations doing the recruitment or helping to promote that particular partnership. Sometimes self-help centers run by law libraries can be located out in public libraries, again, where the public library has the resources that make them more accessible to the general public. Some positive examples of these partnerships. In Minnesota, a few areas actually where partnerships have, because of our work with the court and our visibility, one being that we were able to get a CLE rule change so that the metro area county law libraries that have self-help centers in them in support of court self-help generally, those library services now qualify, those pro bono attorneys that serve in them qualify for CLE credit. They get 1 credit for every 6 hours of service and then up to a maximum of 6 hours. So that's an incentive that has been very helpful. We also have a Legal Services Advisory Commission that puts out grant applications every year to legal aid agencies in the state, and this is for distribution of IOLTA money, the interest on lawyer trust account money. And the latest application for 2015, those who are applying have to explain how they're going to work with their county law library, especially for greater Minnesota where those collaborations are really important. So those are some really great examples, positive examples of what can happen when we partner. Again, the self-help center concept, there can be some negatives associated with that depending on the power imbalance between the library and the court system. So it may require a little bit in terms of negotiation, in terms of expressing shared interest, and then the library explaining that they can reduce the burden on the court, that they have technologies, resources, and space. It's important to establish ongoing communications and to stay positive so the library doesn't feel that it's being overpowered by the court and resources are being diverted for court purposes and not for library purposes. But again, there are boundaries and there's negotiation that can happen to make those boundary lines clearer. And I guess I would just refer to a book that probably everyone's read years ago called Getting to Yes, which may be something that could be helpful in that particular area. Another sort of negative that turned into a positive for us here was I think what we're seeing by having the criminal expungement clinic and the brief advice clinic we have here on Housing and Conciliation Court, we're getting many more people coming through our doors who have never been in a county law library before. Some people are imminently homeless. Some people have obviously criminal expungement. They may have records. They may not know how to follow the law exactly like a optimum citizen might. So I think we're seeing some, we know we are seeing some problems with patron behavior to the point where I feel like we need to develop a code of conduct policy. So I sent an email over to the public library director, asked if she could share what they've got going on with her library, because it's right here in downtown St. Paul. And I mentioned it's really great to know that our criminal expungement collaboration seems to be taking off in the public libraries, because 2 more have added on just in the last couple of months. And so she replied back that yes, she did have policies. She acknowledged that yes, it was nice that there were these collaboration on criminal expungement. And then she also offered to send a couple of her staff over to talk to us so that we could hear more and get some support from the public library with regard to problem patron behavior. So again, I think there are positive and negatives, but through communication techniques, there's ways to overcome that and become a good example of a good collaboration and promote that so as to increase the benefits from that, because they can come back and there can be better enhancements along the way. Next slide, please.
Before you start the next slide, person who's having a conversation, please mute your telephone. We can hear you. Would the person having a conversation about public librarians please mute your telephone? Thank you.
I don't know, maybe other librarians know about it, but I didn't even know there was something called pro bono.
You want me to start?
lawhelp.org.
I don't think they're going to.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
thank you, Terry. Go ahead.
Other ways to partner. I know I say this a lot, but wouldn't it be great to see a law librarian on every state's Access to Justice Commission or its equivalent? If there isn't a slot for a law librarian to serve on your state's commission, you could volunteer to work on a subcommittee, offer to speak to the group about how law libraries and public and academic non-law libraries can help, offer to share information for the commission through librarian networks and on library and library association websites. I've done all of those so far as I've been trying to get on our commission. Serving on such commissions or committees helps us promote law librarianship, to network, and to form partnerships to advance access to justice initiatives. It also helps us stay abreast of legal services and state and county bar and court initiatives so that we may refer our patrons for assistance. In South Carolina, our Access to Justice Commission was created by administrative order of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in 2007. I have lamented for years that there is no law librarian on the list of members. The Chief did amend the order in October. It now says representative of the law school instead of dean. But I didn't get to be that person, but maybe later. Plus, there is a category for the Chief to make general appointments. I'll see what I can do with that one. I am happy to announce that I was invited yesterday to serve on one of the Commission's subcommittees or working groups. So, you get in any way you can. Our research assistant here at the law school looked at our other states, and it's hard to tell from just the membership categories, but it appears that there are only a handful of Access to Justice Commissions across the country that have positions for law librarians that say law librarian. Some are hidden under other categories. But if we persevere and can get law librarians involved with Access to Justice Commissions in every state, it would greatly serve the cause of access to justice. Now, Sarah is going to talk about partnering with advanced technologies. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Terry, and congratulations to you that you got invited to be on one of the subcommittees. That's wonderful. And at this juncture, I would want to say, if any of you out there on the call have been appointed to an Access to Justice Commission or a subgroup of the Commission, we would invite you to participate in monthly conference calls of the Law Librarian Work Group under the Self-Represented Litigation Network. And if you're interested, you can email me or anyone on the call, any of the speakers on the call, or just go to SRLN.org and look at the information about the Law Library subgroup and make a contact there so that we could invite you to participate and inform us of what you're doing out there with your Access to Justice Commission, because they're critically important and those partnerships are really important for us. So with regard to advanced technologies, again, the courts are the major partner for the government law libraries, court law libraries, and the advanced technology largely involves document assembly software, which is available on our computers and is uniquely ours. So by explaining that we can help the court reduce burden by providing the space and the staff to support those document assembly programs and the printing capability that is available with that, and possibly scanning, I think we have an argument to say why we're uniquely important and strategic to the court's mission in producing court documents via technology. We also can integrate resources, so if people need a Black's Law Dictionary or they're looking for more information on how to put together a detailed custody, parenting time order, we've got the materials here. And even for people who have a very unusual form, the court can send and does send to us people who we can show samples of forms that they might need to create that aren't on a court website or in a document assembly type fashion. Law Help, as I mentioned before, and Pro Bono Net have been, Law Help especially, and legal aid agencies have been putting together access to justice document assembly programs. These are for non-court forms, but just it's an ATJ format that walks people through the creation of a legal document such as a power of attorney or a healthcare directive. We were able to effectively pair up with our legal aid agency to get an LSTA grant to create those forms for Minnesota, and then our legal aid agency took it upon itself to promise to do any updating as laws were changed around those particular topics. So that got us off on a very nice footing in establishing a partnership with our local legal aid agency. Also, an ideal partnership, just as what I explained, the communication back and forth where the law librarian has an opportunity to give feedback or to suggest that a form that doesn't exist should be created, or for forms that are out there, we work with users so we see whether the user is really understanding how to operate the form or understand the instructions, or by just sitting down and reading the instructions and going through the forms ourselves to see if they make sense to us. I think that feedback is valuable because, again, that's just one of those areas where that feedback is cut off unless people are willing to make the call and go out of their way to express what the problems are or what corrections should be made. And librarians can do that. Again, we have a shared mission in that regard. And probably the biggest evolving system that is going to impact public law libraries and possibly public libraries is pro se e-filing. This is going to generate all kinds of partnerships because the courts are going to be seeking places to send people for staff assistance and instructional information, as well as the equipment to walk them through pro se e-filing. So again, in that regard, I just want to quickly mention that the public librarians here in Minnesota some of them know about e-filing. They're waiting to get more information about what that might be, but at the same time, when we get people in the law library who don't seem real computer literate, the public library is a great place to send them for classes on computer competency, computer availability. Quite often the public library has better location and hours, parking available. So that public library partner is really important, even in something like the document assembly and the computer availability. Again, to establish communications is really important, and then to promote those resources that we have available. One example here again in Minnesota was use of ICANN forms with our local court, and then we were invited to support family court in that regard and have become a solid partner in providing ICANN support for divorce forms, joint custody, and so on and so forth here in Minnesota. Next slide, please.
There's another way to partner that I'd like to talk about for a second that's most innovative. Academic and public law librarians can partner with law schools, and we know they can partner to support law school clinic programs that help those who cannot afford legal services in targeted areas. They can also support the newest law school innovation, the Incubator Program, that trains law grads to operate solo and small firms while serving the underserved, of which we all know there are many. Law librarians can provide legal research training on fee-based, free, and low-cost legal research, and we can maintain legal collections and online resources for their use, as well as research guides to support their research. I have only read about incubator programs, and there could be maybe an entire webinar on them, but understand that they're typically located in law schools. And the first incubator was started by Professor Fred Rooney at CUNY, who is now at Thoreau Law School Center for Community Justice, another incubator he started.
2:30 or 3 o'clock?
Whoever's talking about a meeting at 2 or 2:30, I can hear every word you say if you want to mute your phone.
No.
I just read a Judge's Journal article from 2014 that reported 18 incubators across the country at the end of 2013. The concept is that law grads provide limited representation or unbundled type services with the help of an experienced attorney or law professor. For persons who of low to moderate income for a moderate fee, Some programs require a number of pro bono hours. In turn, the grads get experience training on how to create and run solo and small law practices. Law schools prepare their grads for practice while supporting access to justice by encouraging them to start solo and small firms and to serve folks in need of legal services. Looking at the website for Toro's Center for Community Justice, its practice areas include family law, labor and employment law, state and trust, small business advising, immigration law, landlord-tenant, bankruptcy, foreclosure, and criminal law. All things that I'm sure we've all helped people research. Just another access to justice initiative that we can become involved with. Next slide, please. So, today we have discussed partnerships to provide training for non-law librarians, to develop core legal collections for all libraries, and to create, contribute, and maintain centralized websites. We have also provided examples of partnerships and discussed partnering through the use of advanced technologies and by supporting innovation through programs such as incubators. There are many other ways to partner to support access to justice initiatives through presentations, scholarships, and advocacy, but we only have an hour, and it's just about up. So Sarah is going to make a few final suggestions about partnering, and then we will entertain questions. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Terry. And just to piggyback on what she mentioned about the incubator programs, here in Minnesota, in St. Paul, there is an effort underway among 2 of the law schools, possibly 3, to put together an incubator program along a new route of mass transit line that went in called the Green Line in St. Paul on University Avenue, where, again, new law school grads would go and host they would call it a low bono clinic around various subject matter, and they would be mentored by practicing attorneys who are experienced to give the law school students or the graduates that initial experience to get them launched. And whatever law library support there might be, we're hoping that the court and county law librarians can collaborate with the academics to define self-help resources as well as practitioner resources that might be helpful to those people. So, final partnership suggestions. One thing I wanted to say at the outset would be we need to do that outreach and invite ourselves into those organizations and presentations and partnerships that we think will be instrumental in strengthening our visibility and our role in access to justice. I know I've talked a lot about the criminal expungement program that we put in the public library in St. Paul that was initially rejected or declined, but when we went back again to visit as law librarians, the director was very open, and that has become a very successful program, not necessarily because it was law librarians presenting it, but also because circumstances had changed around that particular library, one being the Green Line I mentioned before goes right in front of that library, so there's much more accessibility through mass transit to get to that location. The other event that changed was our criminal expungement statute was enhanced so that there are more possibilities to get criminal expungements here in Minnesota now, and more people clamoring to try to get through that court process to get their records cleaned up. So there's an example of an initial no may turn into a yes if you keep repeating the invitation. Obviously, repeating the invitation can also generate more familiarity with the law library and the law librarian and what they do to make it more comfortable to work with a partner who may not be as familiar with who we are and what we do. Again, we can promote the library and distinguish those qualities that we have that we believe are unique and that bring strength to the partnership, so we need to get out there, promote that message, and repeat that message as much as possible. We need to negotiate where there may be boundary lines that we want to make clear, and where our role, where we provide something that is possibly in the view of our partner an uncertain contribution. We need to make that clear so they know what we're doing and why we're important. and where our boundaries are going to be asserted so that it is not perceived that, oh yeah, you can just tap into the law library funding for this other court process. That's just a boundary that can't be crossed. We have to protect what we do too. Next, we need to collaborate to set that partnership up, to implement it, to develop it, to get it successful. And once we have it up and running, we need to learn how to develop communication with those partners that we're working with, and possibly even decide ahead of time how we want to evaluate the partnership so that we're all on board on what kind of evaluation techniques are going to be applied to that partnership. Again, we want to promote the partnership, especially with court staff. We may want to go and talk to them about revisiting what we do in the law library. We may want to reinvite ourselves to their locations to see what they're doing, because I guarantee that each time you make those visits or they visit you, there's going to be something new that's learned or changed. Finally, we want to celebrate as much as possible, whether it's just noting on an email, yeah, the criminal expungement clinics are doing really well in the public libraries. Maybe you want to promote someone, a program through nominating it for an award, or maybe a more formal celebration would be warranted for whatever's going on. But in any case, I think that's a good way to end. I will say that I'll end with going back to the beginning, which is that we in all our different types of law libraries, just as a very basic outreach partnership exercise, could reach out to our academics, to our private firms, to our court libraries, get together, maybe at a chapter event, and talk about access to justice and what we can bring to the table. It's a really great place to start, and I think I'll end on that note. Thanks, everyone. We'll go to questions and answers.
Thanks.
Great, thanks. Well, during our question and answer session, if you just go ahead and send your messages to me through the chat box, and then I'll relay the questions to our panelists. For any questions that we're unable to answer during the Q&A session, we'll supply our email addresses in the last PowerPoint slide so that you can send us your questions and comments after the program. I'll start with one of the questions that came through just a moment ago, which was, why is it important for law librarians to serve particularly on the Access to Justice Commission? Why is that important?
Well, I'll start with that one since I've talked about it for a minute. For me personally, I'm an academic law librarian, and I see the people who come in my library all the time, and I teach law students, and a lot of the people who are dealing with what is going to be done with the court system and the forms that will be put up online, and many things that will affect access to legal information are on that commission, and I want a voice, and I think they need to hear what the law librarians have to say, because we are on the front lines of working with folks who can't necessarily don't have legal representation, and they're in the law library trying to do their own legal research.
Okay, thanks, Terry. The next one is, do you have any...
Can I add to that, James?
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Sarah.
This is Sarah. Yeah, I just wanted to add, in Seattle, King County Law Library, Rita Dermody has been involved with the Access to Justice Commission there, not necessarily on it, but more on a subgroup. But I think she's represented and has been able to provide the expertise around technology. In that particular state, they developed technology principles so that those that are using technology, there would be, basic parameters about what technology needs to look like, how user-friendly it needs to be. They're also been a great state on developing or looking at developing forms in different languages. So I think that perspective is very important, and also that we're seeing people coming through the door just as legal aid agencies are, and we need to remind the court that, yes, we're seeing these people every day, and these services need to be provided for them.
Okay, as a follow-up to that, someone wants to know, who should we email or contact in order to serve on an Access to Justice Commission?
I think you could find if you know who is the chair is the person to do it. I think that we just changed a membership on ours, and the chair was a grad here, so he knew me and said ask her to do this. It was a particular subcommittee. But in the past, I've talked to the director of the Access to Justice Commission, and said, can I be on there? Can I be on there? And it just depends on how yours is set up. Ours is set up by our Chief Justice by administrative order. Some are not. Some may be created in other ways, but I'd find the chair of the committee and offer. Look at the membership and see if there's a place for a law librarian membership, because there may already be a law librarian if you don't know, that may be on the commission already.
Okay, thanks, Terry. Sarah, I think this one might be for you. Do you have any cost estimates for starting a self-help center in a law library?
We did the SRLN survey. That was done, I think we did our final report early last year, and we asked for people to give us feedback on what it was costing to set up a self-help center in a court, and we didn't get reliable data. We had a extreme variation from low to high as far as the cost goes, but I've worked with 2 self-help centers in 2 different counties, and basically there's no cost. We're providing the space. Someone does the recruitment. There's a cost maybe associated with forms that we pass out, but ours is basically no cost at all, other than labor, obviously labor, and we use law school students and then the pro bono volunteers giving of their time.
Okay. There were 2 questions that seem somewhat related, and I'm wondering if they're in some of our attached documents in the PowerPoint. Someone wanted to know the URL of the AALL SCCL Central Repository, and along the same line, someone wants to know the link to the MAL core resources.
Okay, I think I gave at the end of the PowerPoint in the resources section, did I put it there? Yeah, Minnesota in the resources page, there's a link to the MAL resources for public libraries. And then the SCCL website, Central Repository, I would say just go to the AALL website, click on the SIS link, and see what you find there. I'm not sure how formalized and how comprehensive it is. I know there are some materials there. That's one thing that we need to work on, is trying to develop a better centralized website for access to justice information somewhere in AALL's website.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Someone asked also, where do we draw the unauthorized practice of law line if the law librarian is also a licensed attorney?
I saw that one. I thought that was an interesting question, because if you're a licensed attorney, then you ask, are you a licensed attorney in the state where you're working? And then the next thing is, do you have malpractice insurance? Because, I'm a licensed attorney, but I'm inactive in the state that I live in and the state that I work in, but I'm not going to give legal advice. I'm a law librarian. I'm not going to give legal advice because I don't have malpractice insurance. So the drawing of the line is in the same place if you're a lawyer as it is if you're not a lawyer. You have to make sure that you're helping them with reference materials, not legal advice. And, it really depends on what state you're in, how far you can, where that line is. In South Carolina, that line is really rigid. We had it as a misdemeanor to practice law without a license. Now it's a felony. People are really afraid, although most people don't. No law librarian ever is prosecuted. They would just tell you to stop doing it. But the line is in, giving advice versus helping them find the resources that they need. And we could talk all day about that.
Right. And the only thing I would add is that I would say that there's a spectrum of where people feel comfortable, again, given the scrutiny of the law that would be applied on unauthorized practice. But when I go out to teach public librarians, I try to be a little bit more rigid to give them, some very good basic, bright line, boundaries, so they feel more comfortable about answering questions. Whereas here in the law library, because it's not just that that I have a legal background, but that I've worked so many, we've worked and experienced so many different questions. We kind of know where we're directing people. But I always try to think, do I have a print resource or an online resource for what I'm telling someone? If I don't, then I don't feel comfortable, and I try to avoid, unless I can get them right to instructions or something else that explains the law. I feel uncomfortable describing the law to them.
Okay, thank you. I think this one's for Terry. What are the main impediments to academic law librarians better serving the public?
Well, I tell you, the problem with academics as I see it, and I just know what I have experienced, is that we serve the law school faculty, the law school students, we serve the university, that is the faculty and the students, and then we serve the bench and the bar. And then down on the bottom, right there, at the very, very bottom, is the public. However, we are a public library. So, and we get public funding, so a lot of libraries are private, and they may not have the same experience that we have. So I believe that we are duty-bound to serve the public, and we are ethically bound to serve the public if you're a member of AALL, if you're at a law school, because of ABA and because of the approval process and the fact that you're a lot of us are lawyers. So I think we have a duty to do it, and it's rather difficult sometimes because of the other things we have to do. Plus, when you throw in what I do, which is I teach, all of the reference librarians teach 3 hours in the fall and 3 hours in the spring in the 1L program, legal research and writing program, you're fitting it in. But you just kind of have to have a passion for it, and if you have the support of your law school, which we do, you can get it done. And the support of your colleagues in AALL, I think that's helped me a lot. But there's a lot out there, but I think you can sort of multitask. You have a lot of hats, but you can do something for your 1L program that at the same time you're helping your public, because they're coming in kind of at the same level sometimes when you think about it, when you're producing materials. So that's what I try to do.
Okay, thank you, Terry. It's time to bring our question-answer session to a close. It's 2:01. I'd like to thank our panelists, SRLN, SCCL, and all of our attendees. Please complete the webinar survey that Michael will be sending to attendees at the close of the program. We would appreciate your comments and suggestions. Thank you all, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.